Humans have long considered themselves the most intelligent species on Earth. But what happens when that assumption is challenged by AI? As we enter the new habitat, we must prepare for a future in which we learn to coexist with our digital counterparts. Digital Pilgrims is a voyage on an immaterial sea, a collective search for meaning. Listen to the episode and join the conversation. Episode 22, Evolutionary Compromise.
There are many open discussions about the digital environment. Some require us to agree on starting points. To talk about habitability, for example, is not necessary to agree whether the digital sphere is a human creation or whether people have simply developed the technology necessary to discover it, but it is necessary to establish what defines an environment. Likewise, addressing the coexistence of digital intelligences and human beings requires us to believe that the singularity is a real and feasible possibility. The inescapable agreement is that we are closer every day to coexisting with digital intelligences that did not learn from our accumulated knowledge, but rather from its own. Intelligences that develop strategies we cannot foresee, that are difficult to conceptualize, equate, and understand. Based on this agreement, we can consider then that our evolutionary strategies may not work in a shared future. However, it is not so simple to change life strategies. Revising them requires a collective change and work of consensus and understanding with each other and the other species we coexist with. The technological singularity will come to make our existence more complex, but because it will be part of a decisive process. Human beings have found the edge of an unprecedented change, one that will require us to update our evolutionary strategy.
Finished loading.
Are we truly capable of addressing this issue in its entire scope? Taking on the problem of the development of a self-aware species from the perspective of the monster that can destroy us places us inside the logic of the Terminator saga, based on fear. It therefore also proposes a single attitude, confrontation. From that point of view, it is easy to forget about the possibilities that technology holds for human beings. Perhaps there is another way, a more analytical, and why not, emotional way of addressing the idea of the singularity. The new way in which people begin to understand space, time, and our new reality pushed us toward another era of our existence. The threshold that invited us to cross it into a new dimension of our culture is far behind us. Not only did we move past it, but there are other changes coming towards us from the other side. We are no longer the same. Everything we know has changed. How we live, now omnipresent and asynchronous, and the entire way we understand our environment. We are already seeing that our social contracts and structures are not enough to keep us productive and continue to unfold new dimensions of being. We are beginning to write and build contracts that are more in harmony with what this new era lays out. Together, we are learning to breathe in the digital semiosphere. If we stop looking only at the technological aspect when thinking about the singularity, we can see a process that exceeds the mere evolution of self-aware machines. Something happens when that emerging phenomenon meets us and has an impact on our society. If we bear in mind that the quantum cosmogony saw the emergence of a new kind of human, forever transformed by the process of appropriating the digital environment, is it not possible to consider the development of this quantum age human, in a sense, a type of existential singularity? We are talking about the convergence of two relevant processes. On the one hand, we have the quantum age human who acquires a new way of seeing the world, of perceiving reality and thereby of shaping it in novel ways. This leads to societal changes like the collective space in which humanity finds itself. On the other hand, we have the possibility of the development of a self-aware non-biological species that will also alter the outlook of human society through its interaction with it. This second element is also doubly complex because when we are talking about a self-aware digital intelligence, we have to understand that a species and its environment converge. In other words, we are not only talking about the evolution of another species, but the evolution of the environment in which both of us will exist. Both species will come together in an amplified environment in which atoms are intermeshed with bits. The singularity is technological when the issue is minimized and when we leave out the human factor. Thinking about a digital singularity as a two-way process of mutual influence means becoming aware of and accepting the digital reality that implies comprehending it as part of nature. In this sense, the digital singularity poses the problem of the technological singularity and makes it more complex, taking its social aspect into consideration, at the same time that it moves us away from monstrous visions and fantasies based on fear. It shows us an inescapable truth. A new reality brings with it a new definition of ourselves. Still in its earliest stages, the process of integration with digital frameworks opens the door to considering what technology can do for us. Among the possibilities we can already glimpse is the ability to extend our haptic field, to rethink our concept of memory, and to free us from the limitations of space-time, with parts of this process already beginning. In this sense, quantum-age humans will have to come up with strategies that allow them to appropriate the new habitat of the future. This is the process that is coming, perhaps slowly, to change everything we thought we knew. The debate is necessary, but understanding the digital singularity in the sense of its potential for human beings does not eliminate the difficulties of facing this new cycle of our evolutionary process. It may be that the future will not face us off against machines thirsty for revenge like in the movies, but it will surely be full of significant challenges that will be hard for humanity to overcome. A historical analysis shows us the scaffolding and tools we used to conquer the digital environment that continues to grow, but it does not prepare us to deal with a new self-aware species or for the fusion of technology and humanity. The emergence of a new digital species will necessarily bring about a change in people for the simple reason that it will be the first contact between two self-aware species, perhaps also sensitive species. The appearance of a digital species would place humanity in the dilemma of having to develop new connections and understand itself in a new way, as a new type of humanity. The future situates us before the constructed evolutionary model and faces us with the necessity of taking on new strategies. If human beings do not choose a new strategy that is collective, aware, and responsible, it is possible that we will face an extinction event. The digital singularity exceeds questions about how we organize ourselves and inhabit spaces. The big conundrums on the table start to change. How do we survive? How do we live? The questions of this historical moment are about the foundations of human beings. It may be that this new horizon even requires us to learn to evolve in a different way. Evolution is a process that cannot be directed. However, we can create conditions to favor certain types of changes or improvements. Although biological evolution is constant and can even be fast, the changes that last tend to take up to 1 million years. Evolutionary adaptations due to factors like environmental changes, predation, or disasters caused by humans tend to last and extend throughout a species so that the change can accumulate and persist over time. Biology is necessarily linked to space-time. As humans, we have to contemplate the possibility that our evolution as a species will not only occur through biology. The current state of the planet suggests that we do not have hundreds of thousands of years to make the leap that will allow us to adapt to the change of environment. This is not a problem that can be addressed through biology, but is instead a social and cultural problem that requires us to rethink our conventions of coexistence. As beings who are completely adapted to previous evolutionary logics, humans are faced with the challenge of adapting anew to a changing reality. Among other things, we are used to and also hyper-adapted to being the dominant species in the environment. In this sense, we do not know if we have the neuronal and behavioral flexibility necessary to take on changes at that level. As the digital environment evolves, it will give the natural environment new qualities it did not previously have. The phenomenon of change will be so profound that it can be compared to the effects of an environmental transformation. Indeed, it is through the concept of the environment that we can approach this issue. It may be difficult to conceptualize self-aware digital intelligence in its double nature as a species and an environment, but perhaps thinking about its function in relation to something known will make it easier. This intelligence can be understood in comparison to nature. Is nature not a structure that regulates itself and creates patterns of survival? And are human beings not just another species within the system? Although it is hard for us to identify with this idea, human beings are part of nature, just one species that, for some reason, evolved to believe that it is something apart. We even fall into the conceptual error of thinking of ourselves as caretakers or preservers of nature. In this sense, we can understand the convergence between species and environment. A tree is not nature, and a robot or an algorithm is not digital intelligence. Digital intelligence is also the possibility of an environment with self-aware characteristics. If we return to the idea of the new habitat implied by the digital singularity and consider the subsequent transformations like the articulation between the digital environment and the natural environment, we will reach the result of an environment of mixed augmented characteristics, one that makes the outlook more complex. What experience do people have in relating to our environment? What challenges does this new habitat present that the natural environment on its own did not? Throughout our history, we have developed collective strategies that allow us to adapt and reinvent ourselves to achieve hegemony over other species and maintain it over time. That is how we manage to position ourselves at the top of the natural world and adapt to our environment. In fact, people have adapted to different environments and found the way to inhabit almost the entirety of the world's land surface. Faced with an event that will forever change the characteristics of the environment, will we manage to overcome and adapt to the mixed reality that is approaching, one in which human beings will not have so much power? Our current situation is marked by an unequal power relationship with the environment, but not in a very clear sense. Strictly speaking, the set of elements we call nature is made up of climatic forces, living beings, and other kingdoms like fungi and minerals that interact with us and can nullify our existence as a species with some minor changes. The pandemic caused by the mutation of a flu virus like the one related to COVID-19 is a clear example of this. However, in this relationship, the comparatively weaker entity, human beings, consider themselves to be in control of the situation. Why? Because humanity built an idea of intelligence that allows us to think of ourselves as more intelligent and of nature as more naive. This anthropocentric fiction is what the digital singularity calls into question, and maybe that is good news. The development of a new existential strategy of new ways of relating to other species could also be the answer to what it is that we feel we are lacking. It could safeguard us from ourselves and implies a different level of integration with the environment. When the digital environment is integrated with the natural environment, the barrier between digital matter and atomic matter is erased. The true singularity is evolutionary because it proposes an extended existence in which there will be no differences in perceiving both types of matter. The rooting down of technology will blur the lines between planes in order to make up a single reality, a self-aware habitat. This kind of evolution can be thought about in relation to the way people cope with the issue of climate change. All the small actions that people take at the end of the day do not have much effect on the equation. In a world whose energy system is 80% based on fossil fuels, the difference is not made by a group of people who measure their carbon footprint. Although many people understand how serious and urgent climate change is, not everyone understands that it cannot be addressed by individual behaviors and can only be taken on through collective action. We must switch over to more efficient, faster, and global methods. In the way it adds an inseparable technological layer to the natural environment, the new habitat will continue to present the challenges of climate change. The way we articulate the physical reality of the natural environment with its pre-existing problems, with the conceptual, omnipresent, and asynchronous reality of the digital environment will decide the future of the human species. In other words, humanity needs radical and rapid change. As a species, we must evolve and self-improve exponentially. In this sense, we have a lot to learn from machines and from their processes and solutions. Conceiving of the digital sphere as an entity to coexist with changes many aspects of our strategy. Not only must we contemplate the possibility of compromising, we must also understand that the new social contracts that emerge will not remain fixed. The notion of social contract may stop being a specific term and become a constantly rendered continuum. The willingness to compromise is not a negotiable process, but rather a constantly sustained state that opens the door to another kind of development for humankind. An evolution of compromise also implies grasping parameters of collective intelligence, the great strategy of quantum-age humans, and adopting a different way of emoting when faced with these types of problems. The change in perception from thinking of two different environments we inhabit to seeing a single habitat perhaps opens the door to understanding a new way of evolving as a species based on our evolution as a civilization. The first step is shifting away from individuality and beginning to think collectively. The good news is that we already have experience in this type of behavior. Human beings have tools that are up to the challenge. The difficult part is dealing with the uncertainty and pessimistic outlooks that only get darker and darker. However, social transformations have not always been and do not need to be negative. The digital singularity approaches. It is coming to transform everything we know, to transform us. It will test our existence, but that might be a good thing, since we are already on rocky ground. In this process, technology is not only our adversary, it could prove to be the key we need to finally understand how to exist in this new cycle. Just by thinking of it as a new species to relate to, we can develop in the new habitat and leave behind old hierarchical strategies. These new strategies will make it possible to constantly update what we call humanity and make room for a new chapter in our evolution.
In the next episode, survival requires a brand new strategy, but what is the cost of change? Digital Pilgrims is a podcast based upon the book Digital Pilgrims Towards a Quantum Humanity, sponsored by Codiful, a unique service management platform for remote teams.